in my experience working across companies, both within the compliance space, companies as a whole that I've worked at, and also as I've worked in consulting now for the last few years, the ability to sort of have intelligent documentation and cataloging is pretty much lacking. And that sort of limitation of coordination and structure of how information is maintained for software publishers, but typically beyond software publishers, cannot be underestimated. Having some level of intelligent subject cataloging is really going to help simplify administration and the recovery of data, and the information around contracts and a host of other things. And as we sort of referred to on the previous slide, it really means that you've got to evaluate how your company will respond to a critical event or an executive pressure or any other sort of outside influence. Could your organization pull data in a matter of hours, or is it something that's likely to take days or weeks? And ultimately, it all comes down to whether that information is complete and offers that full audit trail to support the interests being followed. So again, it's not something to be underestimated. The value of having that intelligence and that capability often for me is how I determine how complex it is going to be working with typical customers. So in terms of coverage, it's probably an important one with Quest. With the likes of Quest as a publisher, the ability to access all of that old historic documentation is really valuable, extremely valuable. I suppose considering a 30+ year timeframe, it's unrealistic for us to expect that all of that is there, but the more you have, the better it is. Quest is one of these publishers that embeds additional terms and conditions in their procurement documentation. And that can obviously lead to extending options around license metrics, auditing terms, particular sales or commercial factors, the list goes on. But all of that additional language may well look to supersede any negotiated terms you may have, for instance, but certainly it's been done to the publisher's benefit in most cases. Where you do see Quest or any other publisher looking to embed terms in procurement content and materials, be they quotes or POs or anything else, you should look to push back on that and negotiate on it. We've all got to remember that the publishers want your organization's money just as much as you may want or need their particular solutions. So being able to access that old information, as I just referred to with the embedded terms, is going to be a pretty critical consideration if your company has to manage and address a compliance event. And being able to actually leverage some of those older terms and push back against anything that the compliance team use that's more current is going to save your organization a huge amount of time, a lot of effort, and it really was going to mitigate a significant proportion of the risk that becomes associated to the audit. And of course, that saves the money for the company in the long term, be that time taken to manage the audit, all the way through to potential settlement considerations if that becomes a factor. With the older framework or master agreements, I didn't want to ignore those because obviously we've referenced TPA and STAs, which are transactional, but there are enterprise agreements, be they framework or master agreements. Quest typically made most of those evergreen, which is where the contracts don't expire until parties tended to terminate them or refresh with a new agreement that specifically cancels out the original contract in favor of the new terms. The older contract terms in themselves are a valuable commodity to you as a sort of custom organization, because those original contract terms typically don't provide the same kind of leverage to the publisher that would be considered for more recent terms and conditions that they apply in today's end user license agreements. And they certainly go a long way to undermining the approach of a compliance function if they have to manage multiple or older historic terms. So one of the things I would definitely say is don't be too eager to renegotiate or swap out terms that are less beneficial to you. And where you are working to renegotiate contracts with publishers, whoever they may be, always push to keep terms that are in your favor, or worst case, look to leverage them to negotiate something that your organization is looking to build with that particular publisher in the future. Last but not least on this slide is source of truth, which is probably a big statement, but having information sources in one location and easy to search and access is really going to simplify and improve your coordination as an organization around the management of a publisher in pretty much most circumstances, whether that's renewal, transactions, audit, or any other sort of factor. And going back in terms of what we said earlier about M&A, considering M&A, the benefits of consolidating contracts and procurement documents for entities that may have been acquired, or potentially to archive those subsidiaries that may have been divested, that's not to be underestimated either. That audit trail can be critical when it comes to managing publisher engagements and sort of ensuring that you're looking at SAM practice and optimization and compliance preparation as holistically as possible. I'm sure most people on this call, in one way or another, have had challenges when it comes to working with paperwork and content and contracts and entitlements. And it's only when you really sort of come to understand an organization's activities with a publisher. In my case, I tend to sort of feel those pains most commonly when trying to coordinate publisher baselines and working with sort of SAM tool updates, etc. But without the benefit of that single source of truth for the publisher, renewals, license purchasing, old audit activities, it can lead to a lot of assumptions, a lot of disclaimers, all of which may, I suppose, ultimately result in a financial cost or burden to the business.